Hi, welcome to Storytime with Booker. Appreciate you being here. Today we're going to continue on with Soleman Rogues Gallery. And today's chapter is Tony Twocombs. So let's get right into it. Walking to a small barber shop, Thomas blew on his hands and slapped them against his sides. The early morning chill spread through his bones in an icy blast. His worn shoes were held together with bands of rubber. As he neared the shop, several of the bands burst and his shoes came apart. Seated on the curb, he moaned about his luck, or lack of it. He leaned back against the light pole and wept. The light above flared, and a shaft of light shone on the street beside the curb. In the light that slowly faded, he saw a pair of black shoes hardly worn. They reeked, but were in better condition than his own footwear. Putting them on, they were slightly damp and loose, but he figured when they dried out, they would adjust to his feet so that the fit would be perfect. As the shoes warmed on his feet, he began to feel a little better. Unlocking a shop, he turned on the lights and looked around. He viewed the shabby frontage with ever-growing disgust. It just wouldn't do. He could do better, but to do so required money, and the paltry amounts that his customers could afford would never allow him to expand or move to a better location. Remembering that he had once owned the shop the other barber was now installed in, he reflected on the fact that he still had a key and wondered if it still fit. Locking up, he walked to the remaining darkness to the shop. The rear door was blocked by old crates. Moving them aside, he tried his key. It fit. The door opened easily. In the back was a small lockbox that he had used as a safe. It was easily found again behind a mirror. The combination was in letters, not numbers, and if he remembered correctly, the word shave should open it. Adjusting the dial to spell out the word, he murmured, "Open sesame," as he tried the latch. The darn fool had never changed a damn thing. Inside must have been about a month's worth, worth of sales since it was almost full to capacity. He stuffed his coat and checked for more. Sure enough, in the desk drawer was the sales box for the register. It opened at a touch and was swiftly emptied. His pockets bulged with cash. He wiped the lockbox and doorknob. His boots left no trace on the floor, so he departed and relocked the door. Speeding back to his shop, he arrived just as the sun rose above the horizon, bringing a rich golden hue to the sky and street. He counted out his ill-gotten gains and found a little over $500 was now his. True, it was mostly singles, but what mattered was the amount, not the denominations. He contemplated what use to make of his new wealth. Wasn't enough to do much, but he could get some new clothes and perhaps a hat. Looking in the mirror, he saw his unkempt mane and his growth of beard. Checking his wallet, he found only $50. Rifling through the money he had taken, he found a 5 and a 10 amongst the ones. Putting them in his wallet and storing the rest away, he put the close sign on the door and turned off the lights. Locked the door and left. On the saunter to his rival shop, he chuckled at the thought of paying for his shaven haircut with his enemy's own money. Arriving just as Carl was opening, he sat in a comfortable chair and waited. Carl busied himself with his normal opening routine. Completed and ready for business, he noticed Thomas sitting already waiting. Due to the fact that Thomas had never shown how much he despised Carl, he was greeted with a friendly bow and a gracious invitation to the chair. Due to the area in which his shop resided, Carl charged $6 for a shave and haircut. Thomas offered $15 if he did a careful job. Carl's hands began to shake at so substantial a sum. He worked carefully and ensured it was one of the best cuts and shaves he could manage. After the initial shock, he came to himself and entertained Thomas with friendly banter about sports, politics, and the weather. Seeing that for once he was going to get a professional grooming, Thomas relaxed and spoke with friendly familiarity. It's going to be a nice day, so I thought I'd take the day off and spend it by the lake and do some fishing. Carl laughed. From the smell outside, you should be able to pick them up right off the beach. Yeah, but would you want to eat it? Carl shrugged in a non-committal way. Hell, if money was tight, probably would. They talked easily as Carl made his final primping cuts. The job done was well worth the $15, especially since in a way the job was done for free. Thomas handed over the $15. Carl graciously thanked him and went to the back to put the large sum in the lockbox. A gasp and scream almost sent Thomas running outside. Stopping mid-stride, he considered that rather than run away, he should assist his friend Carl, and Carl was still screaming at the open and empty lockbox. Thomas peered into the depths of the box, but then looked curiously at Carl. What's the matter? Do you have some money in there? Carl staggered backwards with his hands covering his eyes. I had a month's worth in there. It's all $500. Thomas whistled sympathetically at so enormous a sum. Well, are you sure you hadn't deposited it and have just, forgotten it? Carl shook his head, but checked his bank account just in case. No deposit. Someone has stolen my money. He rushed to the phone and called the police. Thomas sat down on the desk chair to wait for the bastions of the law. He felt it might be beneficial to see how the police worked. With the knowledge gained, he could formulate his own plans for the future with greater confidence. Sirens heralded the arrival. Swift explanations from Carl set the wheels of justice in motion. They examined the lockbox, doors, windows, and floors. They checked for fingerprints and footprints. They wrote copious notes in their books. In the end, they had nothing to go on, no evidence at all to assist them in discovering the culprit. Thomas was all sympathy, and once assured of the police's findings, or rather lack of them, and noting the inefficient way they worked, he departed. At a local clothing store, he looked over the best apparel they had to offer. He chose with care a new white shirt with red stripes, a pair of well-cut trousers, a hat suitable for his trade, and deep burgundy arm gaiters to place on his frayed to replace the frayed ones that had faded to pink. He was looking over a pair of deep black shoes, considering them carefully. Sadly, he determined that the purchase would eat up too much of the remaining funds. Heading back to his shop, he considered what to do next. Well, the shop needed a touch-up, and some of his scissors could definitely use a sharpening. It would aid in increasing his wealth to facilitate his rise in the world. Well, on second thought, there was an easier way to raise the funds. All around him were likely prospects for theft. Further afield were more prosperous shops that could be lightened of their excess funds. The more he considered the prospects, the more he liked the idea. He could be the brains and allow others to be the brawn. Plenty of money for him with little risk to his person. Amongst his clientele were plenty of men who boasted of their skills in theft. Further, they were nearby at the mission. He would pull one or more job for himself and still have enough to purchase the aid of others. Among his customers, he occasionally had those who were mobsters of high repute. They came to him because of his skill and the fact that he was out of the way. He remembered the styles they wore and the nicknames they had been given. Each had been divulged a facet of their personality or skills. He'd have to think of a name for himself. Having forgotten to lock the door, a customer entered and sat in a chair expectantly. Thomas grinned as he recognized Two-Gun Gunther, a known crime boss who wore two holsters under his natty suit. Two-Gun didn't say anything. He shook out his newspaper and waited for Thomas to begin. Thomas knew the score and began Two-Gun's regular haircut. As he trimmed the hairs and shaved him, he noted the clothes Two-Gun was wearing. Dark colors, rich fabrics, and restrained jewelry. Deciding something similar might be appropriate for himself, he mentally made a shopping list for later. Since he was now open, he decided to stay open and took on a few more customers. One in particular he considered might be useful. Frank Fingers McCall. He was a lockpick expert and safecracker extraordinare. Considered as a henchman, he was perfect. He didn't set up his own jobs, but was for hire to whoever needed his skills. Thomas worked skillfully, and when finished, he offered the cut and shave gratis if he promised to come back at 8 in the morning or 8 in the evening. A mobster had recently rented out his back office and asked for Thomas to send him anyone who he felt would be useful. Frank looked at the neat cut and felt his smooth skin and decided that he would very much like to meet whoever Thomas wanted him to. Who is it? I mean, what's his name? Thomas hadn't even thought of one, but looking at the two combs in his hands, decided on a name that might fit his other self. He's called Tony Two Combs. Frank shook his hand and reiterated his promise to meet Tony Two Combs later that night. Thomas closed his store and went out in search of a new ensemble suitable for his alter ego. Hearing that he would need to go to a variety of stores to get the clothes he wanted, he did so in the knowledge that if he went only to one place, they would be able to identify him. If he diversified, then he was just one of many customers making a purchase. From the shop earlier, he bought a black shirt with thin burgundy stripes. Another shop provided him with a black tuxedo slacks. The haberdashery sold him a stiff felt boater's hat and scarf. The finishing touch was a wine-colored bow tie, so dark a red it was almost black. With dark clothes, he could operate at night almost unseen. Pulling down the shades of the shop, he cleaned his office and then changed into his alternate clothes. He slicked back his hair with Brill cream as a finishing touch. With the hat put low and the scarf covering his lips, he was not only a man of mystery, but a man of power. Changing into his working clothes again, he set up the back office to imitate one of a powerful mob boss. A small carpet of thick shag, an imposing desk, chairs, and a comfortable visitor's chair, all brought second-hand, gave the impression of an important person in a temporary office. He placed the light on a shelf so that if he kept his hat low on his face, he would be in shadows while his visitor was illuminated. The scene set, he waited for the next knock on the door. At 8 o'clock approached, his heart beat faster. He was beginning his new career as an important mobster. Granted, he was a mob boss without minions, but bringing in one could bring others if their first foray proved profitable. This expected knock came. He heard a rattling as the door was tested. A squeak told of someone entering. The footsteps became louder as Frank approached the back office. He knocked and receiving an invitation to enter, stepped through to his first meeting with Tony Two Combs. Tony waited for Frank to sit. Frank tried to see the face in the shadows to no avail. The man was certainly well dressed, and the hands showed clean and the nails neat. The jewelry was of good quality, but not gaudy or flashy. Frank was impressed. He waited to be addressed. The voice that issued from the darkness was deep and commanding, though not unfriendly. Thomas has told me of your abilities, and I think you might be the man I need for my opening gambit into this town. All I want from you is for your assistance in opening the rear entrance to the Able Fund Savings and Loan, and then the opening of the safe. Half of what we find will be yours. Frank's eyes widened. Half the swag? Here was a boss he could work with. Most others wanted 3/4 or more. Thomas continued. Down the road, the percentage will, of course, change as more crew are added, but you and I will always receive the lion's share. I'll provide the location for action. You will provide the crew. Now, please remain here while I procure some necessary articles for our endeavor, but then we will set out. Thomas left and went to the front of the shop. Here he took 2 combs and bent them so that if thrown, they would return. He sharpened the handle on several long combs and added a can of spray lacquer he had from refinishing his counter. A can of wood oil followed into his commodious pockets and was augmented by a hairdryer. Opening the handle, he changed the gearing to increase heat and wind speed to an extraordinary level. If he had set it right, it would blow so hard it could knock someone off their feet or speed dry the lacquer. Picking up Frank in a borrowed car, they drove to the S&L, only 3 blocks away. Frank was concerned that there were just the 2 of them. It will be sufficient. was all Thomas said. Frank wasn't convinced. I thought about tackling the S&L a while ago, but well, I could open the safe easy and getting the door open, but getting to the alarm box won't be easy. With that on, we won't be able to even get to the safe. The alarm will be my concern. Do not trouble yourself with that. Once the door is open, step aside, so I may turn it off. Frank shrugged and decided to have faith in Thomas, or Tony. At the savings alone, Frank worked swiftly to open the back door. The alarm was on the far side of the office, on the same wall as the door. Thomas took a bent comb, measured height and distance in the reflection of a picture on the wall, and threw. The comb sailed in an arc, accurately hitting off the button on the alarm. Frank grinned at the ease with which Thomas had dealt with the alarm. For Thomas, this was ridiculously simple. Many times when the shop was slow, Thomas had bent combs and threw them so often that he was accurate, hitting any object from any position. Wait while I prepare for the reception of the guardians of the law. He went to the front door and laid out a generous amount of the oil on the floor, rendering it slippery in the extreme. Returning, he spoke softly. Please open the safe now. Under the influence of the politeness of the request, Frank bowed and approached the safe. A bit of sandpaper across his fingertips would allow him to feel the tumbles as well as hear them. Thomas remained motionless so as not to interfere with Frank's work. Within moments, Frank had the door opened. As Thomas entered, he brought Frank inside, admonishing him to take no packets higher than 50s. Higher than that, we'll have the serial numbers recorded. Without further words, they filled their pockets, working silently, though swiftly. They heard several cars approaching. 2 from the front and 1 from the rear. Frank was all for leaving, but Thomas told him to continue filling his pockets. The door in front rattled as the officers attempted to open it. Thomas indicated the time to leave was at hand as soon as he heard them attempting to break down the rear door. It would take a while for them to succeed, and with the floor slippery, they had plenty of time. The officers at the rear were a different matter. There was nothing to block their path. Thomas softly told Frank to follow close behind him. When we get out, head to the car, get it started, back up to where I will be standing. Once I enter, depart to the rear of the barber shop. Frank marveled at how calm and in control Thomas was. Surely he was a man of long experience and deep knowledge. Thomas picked up the bent comb from where it lay below the alarm box. Following close behind, Frank dove to the car as Thomas faced the police. In the rearview mirror, he could see Thomas illuminated by the flashlights. In his right hand was what looked like a hairdryer blowing forcefully. In his left hand was a cannon he was spraying into the wind. The blower was forming. Frank had seen a few hair blowers in his time, but none that could produce such a gale as this was creating. The spray had coated the officers into immobility. Backed car up, and then Thomas entered. He sped off to the shop. They left the car a block away, and with the keys still inside. Back in the office, they counted out their ill-gotten spoils. The packs were stacked and split into equal shares. Between the 4 packs of 50s and numerous packs of 20s, each man gained $12,000. Frank pocketed his share, stood and held out his hand. Hey, anytime you need me, I'm your man. He handed over a number he could be reached at and headed out. Departing cautiously, he took a circuitous route home, only to reverse course and head towards the savings alone. A small crowd was outside, laughing hysterically. Inside, he saw the police still sliding around, falling and bumping into each other. The 2 who had been outside were using a tow rope to catch them and tow them to outside. They still glistened from the spray that had immobilized them, but it had worn off enough for them to move now. Turning around to walk back home, Frank pondered on the enigma of Tony Two Combs. He'd have to ask around his friends if any knew him from somewhere else. Somewhere, someone must have known him. All right, so that's it for today. We're going to do the next one is investigations, where Soleman finally comes in. I think that one's short, so we'll do 2 investigations and another victim, and that should be enough to fill our time slot. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Hope you come back, and I look forward to seeing you again on Monday. So that's our new days, Mondays and Fridays. So look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate you dropping by. And I will see you on Tuesday again. So be good and be good to yourself. Have a good evening. Bye.